Do you know this guy? He is Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria. He was a Colombian drug lord, narco-terrorist and politician, who was the founder and a sole leader of Medline Cartel. Sit down as I get you through his history. Pablo Escobar was the wealthiest criminal in history. He was having amassed an estimate net worth of $30 billion by the time of his death, which is equivalent $70 billion as of 2023. He was called by many names, after he succeeded. His other names are El Patron, Don Pablo, El Padriona and Robin Hood Pricer. He was the third of 7 children and grew up in poverty, in the neighboring city of Medline. His father was a small farmer and his mother was a teacher. Escobar left high school in 1966 just before his 17th birthday, before returning 2 years later with his cousin Gustavo Gaviria. At this time, the hard life on the streets of Medline had polished them into gangster bullies in the eyes of teachers. The two dropped out of school after more than a year, but Escobar, who did not give up, briefly became autonomous in Latin America by forging high school diplomas. He then studied in college with the goal of becoming a criminal lawyer, a politician, and eventually the president, but had to give up because of lack of money. Escobar had been involved in organized crime for a decade when the cocaine trade began to spread in Colombia in the mid-1970s. Escobar's meteoric rise caught the attention of the Colombian Security Service, DAS, who arrested him in May 1976 on his return from drug trafficking in Ecuador. DAS agents found 39 kilograms of cocaine in the spare tire of Escobar's car. Escobar managed to change the first judge in the lawsuit and bribed the second judge, so he was released along with other prisoners. The following year, the agent who arrested Escobar was assassinated. Escobar continued to bribe and intimidate Colombian law enforcement agencies, in the same fashion. His carrot-and-stick strategy of bribing public officials and political candidates in Colombia, in addition to sending hitmen to murder the ones who rejected his bribes, came to be known as silver or lead, meaning money or death. The Medline Cartel and the Cali Cartel both managed to bribe Colombian politicians, and campaigned for both the conservative and liberal parties. Hence, Escobar and many other Colombian drug lords were pulling strings in every level of the Colombian government, because many of the political candidates whom they backed financially were eventually elected. Although the Medline Cartel was only established in the early 1970s, it expanded after Escobar met several drug lords on a farm in April 1978, and by the end of 1978 they had transported some 19,000 kilograms of cocaine to the United States. Soon, the demand for cocaine greatly increased in the United States, which led to Escobar organizing more smuggling shipments, routes, and distribution networks in South Florida, California, Puerto Rico, and other parts of the country. He and cartel co-founder Carlos Leda worked together to develop a new transshipment point in the Bahamas, an island called Norman's Cay about 350 kilometers, 220 miles, southeast of the Florida coast. According to his brother, Escobar did not purchase Norman's Cay. It was instead a sole venture of Leda's. Escobar and Robert Vesco purchased most of the land on the island, which included a 1-kilometer (3,300 feet) airstrip, a harbor, a hotel, houses, boats, and aircraft, and they built a refrigerated warehouse to store the cocaine. From 1978 to 1982, this was used as a central smuggling route for the Medline Cartel. With the enormous profits generated by this route, Escobar was soon able to purchase 20 square kilometers (7.7 square miles) of land in Antioquia for several $1 million, on which he built the Hacienda Naples. The luxury house he created contained a zoo, a lake, a sculpture garden, a private bull ring, and other amenities for his family and the cartel. Escobar was also involved in philanthropy in Colombia and paid handsomely for the staff of his cocaine lab. Escobar spent millions developing some of Medellín's poorest neighborhoods. He built housing complexes, parks, football stadiums, hospitals, schools, and churches. Escobar also entered politics in the 1980s and participated in and supported the formation of the Liberal Party of Colombia. In 1982, he successfully entered the Colombian Congress. Although only an alternate, he was automatically granted parliamentary immunity and the right to a diplomatic passport under Colombian law. At the same time, Escobar was gradually becoming a public figure, and because of his charitable work, he was known as Robin Hood Paisa. He alleged once in an interview that his fortune came from a bicycle rental company he founded when he was 16 years old. In Congress, the new Minister of Justice, Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, had become Escobar's opponent, accusing Escobar of criminal activity from the very first day of Congress. Escobar's arrest in 1976 was investigated by Lara Bonilla's subordinates. A few months later, Liberal leader Luis Carlos Galán expelled Escobar from the party. Although Escobar fought back, he announced his retirement from politics in January 1984. 3 months later, Lara Bonilla was murdered. The Colombian judiciary had been a target of Escobar throughout the mid-1980s. While bribing and murdering several judges, in the fall of 1985, the wanted Escobar requested the Colombian government to allow his conditional surrender without extradition to the United States. The proposal was initially answered in the negative, and Escobar subsequently founded and implicitly supported the Los Extraditable Organization, which aims to fight extradition policy. The Los Extraditable Organization was subsequently accused of participating in an effort to prevent the Colombian Supreme Court from studying the constitutionality of Colombia's extradition treaty with the United States. In support of the 6th of November 1985, far-left guerrilla movement that attacked the Colombian Judiciary building and killed half of the justices of the Supreme Court. In late 1986, Colombia's Supreme Court declared the previous extradition treaty illegal due to being signed by a presidential delegation, not the president. Escobar's victory over the judiciary was short-lived, with new President Virgilio Barco Vargas having quickly renewed his agreement with the United States. Escobar still held a grudge against Luis Carlos Galán for kicking him out of politics, so Galán was assassinated on the 18th of August 1989 at Escobar's orders. Escobar then planted a bomb on Avianca Flight 203 in an attempt to assassinate Galán's successor, Cesar Gaviria Trujillo, who missed the plane and survived. All 107 people were killed in the blast. Because 2 Americans were also killed in the bombing, the U.S. government began to intervene directly. After the assassination of Luis Carlos Galán, the administration of Cesar Gaviria moved against Escobar and the drug cartels. Eventually, the government negotiated with Escobar and convinced him to surrender and cease all criminal activity in exchange for a reduced sentence and preferential treatment during his captivity. Declaring an end to a series of previous violent acts meant to pressure authorities and public opinion, Escobar surrendered to Colombian authorities in 1991. Before he gave himself up, the extradition of Colombian citizens to the United States had been prohibited by the newly approved Colombian Constitution of 1991. This act was controversial, as it was suspected that Escobar and other drug lords had influenced members of the Constituent Assembly in passing the law. Escobar was confined in what became his own luxurious private prison, La Catedral, which featured a football pitch, a giant dollhouse, a bar, a jacuzzi, and a waterfall. Accounts of Escobar's continued criminal activities while in prison began to surface in the media, which prompted the government to attempt to move him to a more conventional jail on the 22nd of July 1992. Escobar's influence allowed him to discover the plan in advance and make a successful escape, spending the remainder of his life evading the police. Soon after Escobar's death and the subsequent fragmentation of the Medline cartel, the cocaine market became dominated by the rival Cali cartel until the mid-1990s, when its leaders were either killed or captured by the Colombian government. The Robin Hood image that Escobar had cultivated maintained a lasting influence in Medellin. Many there, especially many of the city's poor whom Escobar had aided while he was alive, mourned his death, and over 25,000 people attended his funeral. Some of them consider him a saint and pray to him for receiving divine help. Escobar was buried at the Monte Sacro Cemetery. He is now resting at Mount Sacro Cemetery. Escobar has been the subject of several books, films, television and music. I hope this was necessary. Please support us by subscribing to our channel on YouTube and our page on Facebook. And again, if you have any idea, or who you want us to talk about in the next video, drop it on the comments section. Thank you for watching and supporting us. We are pleased to your attention. Shalom.